How's that?
Okay. All right. So we are up and live with Dominic from App Bank. And this is Ivo and I. We're very excited. Dominic, we waited a lot of time to interview you. And now during the matches when we get a chance to experience App. So what is App? Who are you? Tell us a bit about the Australian market. We're excited.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah, no, it's great to be here. Thanks very much for having the chat. Look, Up was, it's a digital bank, basically. Some people call it a neobank digital bank. It was really the first of its kind in Australia. We were the first to launch back in 2018. The rest of the world were a little bit ahead of us, mostly due to regulations. It was very difficult to launch a bank in Australia. The licensing regime was very strict and difficult. But a couple of years ago, the regulators actually made it possible to apply for a restricted banking license so that new digital banks could sort of get started, which has been really awesome. And it's really triggered a lot of activity and excitement in the market. And so we hear about, Nubank in South America or Monzo in the UK or N26 in Europe. And there's all this exciting stuff happening around the world. And in Australia, we were sort of unable to participate in that, in that level of excitement around digital banking. So yeah, Up came together. We actually went to production in 2017 and we ran for about a year in sort of stealth mode just for staff. So that we could take the regulators on the journey because they hadn't released the new legislation yet. So we sort of went on the journey with the regulators, and then in October 2018 we launched, and we grew very quickly. So we went from a launch period to 30,000 customers in a few months, and then 100,000 customers in a few more months. And it was just extraordinary, the level of excitement and passion that there was, for something like banking,
Yeah.
So that's pretty much like where we're at, is the first to launch a digital bank in Australia. And now we're the largest. We're probably larger than all the other neo digital banks combined.
Wow. So how was it like to get the license? I mean, like all this regulation talks and stuff, like.
Yeah, it's pretty tricky, because it's a new regime that had been launched in Australia. We actually decided not to go down that path. And we, as I said, were already sort of in production and using Up before the legislation passed. So we took a different route. So I run a company, myself and my business partner, called Ferocia, and it's a technology company. And what we did is we had been building banking software for a long time. So we've been building banking software maybe for 9 or 10 years now. And we partnered with a bank in Australia called Bendigo Bank, or Bendigo and Adelaide Bank. And they're a banking group. They're a public company. They have about 10 different, banks within their group and all that. And they're the fifth largest, or they run the fifth largest retail bank in Australia. And so we've been working with them for quite some time. We build their mobile banking app as well as their desktop and their tablet banking app. It's also all in one platform. And that went live in, I think, 2014. We started that project in 2012. And it went live in 2014. So we've been doing that for a long time. And we've developed this relationship of trust with Bendigo. So what we did is we said, what do you need? What are the ingredients to launch a digital bank in Australia? You need a banking license, but you couldn't get it yet. You need, 100 million, 200 million, you need lots of money, right?
Yeah.
And then you need a core banking system. And the core banking systems are becoming easier now because there's cloud hosted systems and there's on-premise and all this sort of stuff that you can, you can sort of make easier decisions around that than you used to be able to. But in essence, they were the three main ingredients that you need. So we had a chat with Bendigo. We actually tinkered with some other banks for a few years, trying to build digital banks with them. And then we had a chat with Bendigo and we were talking to them about this great idea we had to launch Australia's first, digital bank. And actually they have a banking license and they have about 10-ish sort of brands running banks within their group. And so we thought, well, there could be an opportunity here for us to partner and not apply for a banking license. So the reason we were able to launch like a year before anyone else is that we actually partnered with Bendigo, and now Up is a collaboration. So it's a partnership between Ferocia, which is the technology company, and Bendigo, which has got the banking license. They also have a core banking system, so we didn't need to set one up from scratch. We're able to actually hook into their core banking system. Like it's a 1960s mainframe, but it's a real-time banking system. And we pretty much build an architecture around that system so that we have real-time access to the system, and we can cache everything in the cloud, and we can actually basically run a digital bank in the same way or even better than most of the other digital banks are able to do it, because we didn't have to go through the hassle. A lot of people will say, you know, you need this brand new core banking system. It's just a dumb database. It's just a ledger. Like it shouldn't actually be, you shouldn't have any logic or any banking sort of business practice in your core banking system. It's really just a data store. And if you treat it that way and you build the logic into the sort of user interaction and the customer experience, it gives you a hell of a lot more flexibility. We do a lot of things in real time that other banks are still doing on batch. And so I think, you know, for us, that partnership, that relationship was the reason we were able to launch so quickly in Australia. So the regulation kicked in 2019, and the first of the new restricted banking licenses was issued in, I think it was maybe March or April 2019, and we launched in October 2018. So we sort of had a little bit of a head start. And then those banks that got their license, and there's 3 or 4 of them, I think there's 4 of them now. So those banks that got their restricted licenses then had to work for a year to get out of their restricted license and get a full banking license before they could launch. So that gave us more than a year's head start on the competition.
Okay,
very
that's
interesting.
something I didn't know. You too, Ivo, right?
Yeah.
You didn't know?
Yeah, definitely. But actually, it little bit remind me, even this situation can be also in Europe. Although some countries have even more restricted, you know, these types of. So for example, I was working in Twisto, and also we were thinking it will be easier to buy a bank to get that license, you know, small bank, you know, than to get their own one. So very interesting. I didn't know it's that new in Australia, that like the regulation.
Yeah. Tell us, what do you need? Like, what does the customer need? Let's go to maybe the basic. What does this customer, Australian customer, any customer needs from a bank in today's world?
Yeah, so it's probably worth just contrasting what they can do now with Up and some of the other neobanks versus what they can do with a traditional bank. So the traditional banks in Australia, like just as a high level, the banking market is completely saturated. You know, there's 25 million Australians, so it's a reasonably small population group. 18 million adults. There's every month the big banks, all the banks have to report their numbers, you know, to the regulators. So there's 55 million reported banking customers in Australia, and there's only 18 million adults. So you could just say that on average, every adult in Australia has, 3 bank accounts. So it's a very well banked population. It's a market that's dominated in an oligopoly. So there's 4 big banks, and those big banks have 85% market share, right? Wow. So basically everybody banks with the 4 big banks. And then there's a long tail there's 450-ish licensed sort of, you know, deposit taking institutions in Australia. So there's probably the 4 big ones, and then there's maybe half a dozen mid-tier banks. And then there are hundreds of small, you know, credit unions, building societies, whatever. So for us, coming into that market with a solved problem, the big 4 banks and a couple of the others like ING have a strong presence in Australia, and they have a really great bank here. They've been in Australia for about 20 years. They would be, I would say, the market leader in terms of the younger demographic and having the, you know, really good digital apps and those sort of things. But the big 4 banks in Australia actually had really good digital banking apps, both desktop and mobile. So on a global scale, the banking apps in Australia are better than most in the world. And all the new Monzos, N26, Revoluts, you know, all these new banks are launching their mobile apps, but actually the mobile apps in Australia for traditional banks are already that good and actually do more than that. So really the competition was for us a very high bar. If you're going to launch a digital bank into Australia, now to answer your question, that's just the background, right? To answer your question, if you're going to launch a digital bank in Australia, you can't just be an app, and you can't have limited functionality because customers already have that. So if you launch Monzo or N26 or Revolut in Australia, you're going to struggle. And the only one that we've seen launch in Australia so far has been Revolut. I think they went live, they opened to the public maybe last week. So really recently, or in the last couple of months, so really recently. But what I'm sort of getting at is that for us looking at how do we launch a new digital bank, we have to compete basically with those big 4 banks because everyone already banks with them, right? And everyone already has 3 bank accounts. So why do they want another bank account? And if you're just going to compete on price, then it's just a race to the bottom. Like these 4 banks are the 4 biggest companies or in the top 10 companies in Australia as well. So they have, you know, they're amongst the top 25 most profitable banks in the world. So that they have huge, deep pockets. There's no point like, how are you going to compete on price? You can't say, oh, we're a digital bank, we've got cost efficiencies, we're cheaper. Like that's just not going to work. So we had to compete on a technology front, on a pricing front, on a product front, and on a usability front. Like everything had to sort of be best of breed. And so, yeah, really, really competitive. And what we were able to do is we were able to launch to market with a whole bunch of new things and reimagine the way that a customer could interact. I'll give you an example. To sign up a bank account in Australia, before Up launched, previously would take at a minimum days, potentially weeks. So you would sign up an account, you'd fill in some forms, you could do it online, but then you would have to wait for your card to arrive in the mail. You'd have to identify yourself, maybe go to a post office or go to a branch, all that sort of stuff. When Up launched, we're the first mobile-only bank in Australia. So lots of the banks had mobile apps, but we were the first mobile-only bank. We integrated with Apple Pay so that you could we're the first bank in Australia to have instant Apple Pay. So our vision was that if you're lining up at a cafe to buy a coffee, hang out with your mates, if you're waiting in the queue to pay for your coffee, our idea was that by the time you got to the front of the queue, you could have opened up a bank account and be paying for your coffee instantly. So that means you had to sign up an account in just a couple of minutes, right? So that was our goal. We achieved that goal in a few months before we even launched publicly. And we were the first bank in Australia to launch with instant Apple Pay that was integrated with the sign-up process. So basically you download the app from the Android, from Google Play, or from iOS from the App Store, and you install the app on your phone. You sign up digitally, and just like you can with the neobanks overseas, for the first time ever in Australia, you could sign up a bank account with just an app, and you could literally have your Apple Pay activated and be paying for your coffee in less than 3 minutes. So the average time to sign up for an Up account is about 2 minutes and 12 seconds. And we now have over 250,000 customers who've signed up. So, we've opened up over 800,000 accounts. So it's out of control. And that little small piece of innovation, like one of the big banks in Australia had launched Apple Pay 3 years before Up launched. But they launched it in a really awkward way where you had to go to the branch to authenticate your ID, or you had to wait for the card to arrive and then scan the card and all this sort of stuff. And we actually made it with, working together with Apple so that you can have what they call instant issuance, right? So you don't even need to wait for the card, you just instantly activate it. And then we worked for about a year with Google so that we could be the first bank in Australia to launch the same thing for Google Pay. And then we did the same for Samsung. And now recently we've announced a partnership with TransferWise, and we're the first bank in all of Asia Pacific to integrate with TransferWise in terms of the announcement. We actually were the second one in Asia to go live, but the first in Australia. So by being the first at those new things and doing them in a sort of a seamless way so that the customer experience is really awesome, we've been able to differentiate from the incumbent banks and also get a head start on the neobanks. So now when, like I said, say a Revolut launches in Australia, Up already has integration with TransferWise. We have the best rates. We have no fees. We don't have subscriptions, so there's no limits on the amount you can transfer and all this sort of stuff. And so it's very difficult unless they want to price differently. Our user experience is better than theirs. So it makes it harder for those neobank competitors, and also I think the big banks need to sort of smarten up their act a bit, because Up has set a new bar for not just design but also for user experience, as well as having simple pricing, transparency, and really great different banking services that no one else offers.
Yeah, we want to talk about. I think
it's definitely very complex. Like the KYC process, everything what you were needed to do. Virtual cards, all this stuff. So you will do all the KYC in the app, right? Or the recognition. Yeah. So everything is in a legal way, right? Like it's regulated, kind of, or what do you need to? Okay, so you need to, let's say, send some money from your bank account, or you will just put your ID, let's say, or how does it work?
Yeah, in Australia, it's basically required to sign up for a bank account that you have to prove the identity of the person who's signing up, and you have to test it against government data. So the government provides databases for your Medicare card, like a medical records, a Medicare card, as well as your driver's license, your passport, those sort of things. So basically we had to automate that entire process. Now there's probably in Australia now there's probably a dozen banks that can do that now. But when we launched it 2 years ago, there was no one that could do it, But
amazing.
So reimagining and reinventing that process. But also for us, it wasn't just about the confluence of design, technology, and banking, like all together. Like that's really important. But it was also, I guess, important for us to educate people that there's a different way, a new way of doing it. Like, you could sign up for this banking app in your pocket on your mobile phone, and it was safe. It's okay. There's a government guarantee in Australia that protects your deposits, and there is a lot of countries now, and it protects your deposits up to 250,000 Australian dollars. So somebody could open a bank account, and because we have this partnership with Bendigo and Bendigo have the banking license, then your deposits are protected. So we had to educate customers that it's okay to download this app from the App Store and then set up a bank account and give your passport and your driver's license and your Medicare card and all this sort of stuff, and that your money will be protected. And then what we did was also pretty clever, I think, is that we gave people a real token gesture. When people signed up, we had like a referral program where you could, refer your mates. We call it hook up a mate. And in Australia, it's pretty colloquial. It's pretty cool, hook up a mate and get them onto Up. And then they become an upsider. And we would send everybody who signed up with a referral $5. Now, $5 is insignificant in the scheme of things. It's not meant to be like bribing people to sign up with $150 or something. It's just $5 so they can buy a Mars bar, an ice cream, a salad, just something small. But they get to experience Up for the first time. So if they sign up for Up and they literally go and buy a coffee and it's only $2.50 or whatever, and it's on us, it means they can use their account instantly. And then the next step for us was to get them to transfer money into their account, from another bank, or maybe get their salary deposited or whatever. And then they sort of become hooked, and they're just like, this is amazing. It's so easy. It's so different. I've never had a bank like it. I did an interesting exercise the other day. One of our creative director, our sort of head of brand, he said to us, I wonder how many people say that they actually love their bank. I thought that's pretty interesting. So I went and had a look in the App Store and in Google Play, and we ran an analysis across all the Australian banks to see how many people had written a review to say they really loved the bank. And we found that on average against all of the other banks, we have about 4 times as many people saying that they love Up. And then compared to the other neos, we have twice as many as all the other neos combined of anyone that's actually said they love it. So it's truly a bank that people can love. And we've seen it happen in with Nubank in South America or with Monzo in the UK. People literally fall in love with their bank and they become like these huge advocates, and they want to tell everybody and spread the word. And we just found that, as I said, the intersection between customer experience, technology and banking, that sort of design-led thinking, once you got that in front of people and they just made their first purchase, they're like, oh my God. Like, here's another one for you, a very simple one. But Up was the first bank to give you a push notification in Australia, a push notification when you made a purchase. And, like Monzo had done it overseas and other banks have done it. And it didn't seem like a big deal to us at the time, but it changes the way that a customer connects with their money and the way that they engage with their bank. And now there's a whole bunch of banks in Australia that are sort of trying to do something similar. But that small little user experience made an enormous difference in the connectivity that people have with their money and their feeling of less anxiety, less stress, having more comfort about where their money's coming, where it's going, and all that sort of stuff. So simple things like that make a huge difference to the way people interact with their money.
So, and simple things like, what are the most popular features on the app? I mean, how do you get to know about, what's coming? I mean, are you listening to the community? Are you working with the developer community? I saw some, open API and activities like that with developers with t-shirts around WWDC and stuff. So tell us.
Yeah, it's also, I wanted to ask, because I saw on your website, there is, roadmap basically. And actually you are the first, fintech when I saw really like open, the tree. And really amazing. I think it's really nice to communicate in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, the tree is amazing. So that we call it the tree of Up. And the idea of the tree of Up is that, it's very rare for a bank anywhere in the world to release a public roadmap. And there are examples, again, like Monzo is a leading player. They have a Trello board, they do blog posts, they have a community, that sort of stuff. But it's very rare for a bank to do that, first off. And then if you go beyond banking, it's very rare for any company to have a transparent, public, open roadmap. And so we thought, well, that's like an amazing way to engage. And we're all software developers, so it's probably worth saying that, like, I'm a software developer. That's, what I've done for a living. And now obviously, I'm one of the co-founders of the company. But actually we're very technology led. So nearly everybody in our team, we don't have any middle management. We don't have a HR department. We don't have a sales department. We have no business development. We don't have a legal or an accounting department. But we are literally just a whole bunch of software developers trying to solve problems with technology. And so, of course, we go to every dub. We've been going to dub since, I don't know, early 2000s. We traveled around Australia, teaching people when the iPhone was released and the App Store was released about, developing mobile apps and everything. We get involved in conferences around, whether it be React Native or whether it be, we go to the Google conferences, the Apple conferences, all that sort of stuff. And so for us, we really wanted to engage not just the development sort of community, because that's sort of where we're coming from, but even beyond that, anybody can come to our website, look at the Tree of Up, and it does something that a Trello board or a blog post or a community doesn't do. So a lot of banks that have tried to do a public roadmap with a Trello board or a blog post or whatever, it's not very engaging. So then they launch a community, and then the community is engaging, absolutely. But what the tree does is it gives context and timing and perception for people. And so when you see it, you know why we're doing one thing over another. So for example, our number one requested feature is joint accounts. But in Australia, probably, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but probably 5% of people have a joint account. So it's not like a huge market that you really want to dominate. It's not a high priority feature, but it is by far our number one requested feature, and we don't have it yet. And when people say, why don't you have joint accounts? Why don't you have joint accounts? Why aren't you listening? Why aren't you listening? Why don't you have joint accounts? They go to the Tree of Up and they see that it's down the bottom of the tree and it hangs off a branch, and the trunk of the tree is having an account, and then having a savings account, and then having real-time transfers between your accounts, and then having international transfers. And they can see the logical journey, the context around why we make those priority decisions and why joint accounts is a really important thing. And one day we'll get to it, but it's not the thing that we're doing first. You've got to build all these building blocks before you get to that. Very hard to explain that in a community forum or on a blog post or something. But when people can see it visually and they can interact with it and they can see what's in development, what's been already developed or what's coming soon, it really helps people in their mindset to understand that we're not being pricks. We actually do care about it. It's just that there's a logical way that we go about prioritizing it. So I think the Tree of Up, it's the first of its kind public roadmap that we had ever seen. It's not inspired by other roadmaps. It's inspired by the technology tree that you have in computer games, because we really felt everyone at the office, a lot of people at the office are computer gamers, right? And we really felt that the technology tree, engages computer gamers in a way that a bank has never engaged its customers. And so for us, that was like a logical sort of inspirational aspect in order to deliver a public roadmap literally like no other.
Wow.
Wow.
Great.
Can you give us a little bit background, for example? I think one of the biggest topics, I know in US, also in Europe, everybody's talking about open banking, or in general, open finance in the future. We've got regulation in Europe, the PSD2, basically, door opener, we really needed to set up some regulations, and some, must be on a paper to really show banks, you must open. So how does that look like for example, in Australia?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, because the open banking movement, Australia looks to other countries to see what they're doing and whether or not it makes sense for us to do that, or whether we'd be inspired by that or whatever. So I think mostly people have been looking at, certainly from a regulatory perspective, looking at the UK and also Hong Kong, Singapore, and other places, but very specifically looking at the UK, and they're probably a few years into open banking. So what we've done in Australia is that the government have been really, really good about putting together this new legislation, this structure, which is called the Consumer Data Rights. And the Consumer Data Rights extends across the entire population and all industries. It's not just for banking, but the very first step in the consumer data right. And what it basically does is give consumers ownership over their own data. It's exactly the opposite of your Facebooks or your Googles, or, the way that, people are giving away all of their personal data and they're becoming the product. So I think it's a really forward thinking piece of legislation that is bucking the trend. And at the moment, there's a bit of a war going on between the Australian government and Google and this sort of stuff. You can go to Google and have a look. But, it's really interesting, because that consumer data right is setting the scene for the next 50, 100 years. The idea is that every human, every person that lives in Australia owns their own data. Obviously inspired by what's happened in Europe with the legislation there. But I think it's a really good idea. So open banking is really the first step. Banks were sort of picked as the first industry to adopt this new CDR legislation, and we're calling it open banking. Now, to put it into perspective, the big four banks, the ones with the 85% market share, they were mandated and given a regulatory deadline. You have to have the first version of the open banking launch. The first version was read-only, and all it does is give you a listing of the products that the bank offers. Really, really basic, simple stuff. It's taken about 2 years to get there. and they went live on the 1st of July. They set up a structure for that product where you have to, and I'm not giving it a hard time. I think it's a great vision. I've obviously tried to explain it in a real positive mindset, but they launched it on the 1st of July. And so now we're a few months in since it was launched, and there's been 2 registered data recipients, and you have to be a registered data recipient to be able to consume the data on behalf of the consumers. So actually the consumers, it's a consumer data right, and it's in the name that the consumer should own their data, but it's mandated that you have to have a registered and authenticated data sort of intermediary, like a data recipient, a provider. And so it's not very innovative and not very conducive to sort of the creative adoption that maybe everyone had hoped. Now, to contrast that, of course, Up is supporting open banking. We're big advocates of it, and we will do it, and we're following it. And our deadline, the big 4 banks had to do it by July, and then all the other banks have to do it a little bit later. I think it's November or sometime later this year. So of course, we will do that, and we're in the process of doing that right now. But meanwhile, we launched our own open API. And our open API gives the consumer access to their own data with no intermediaries, and they have full access to all that data. They have read access to all the data at the moment, plus they have write access for some parts of the program. And just that first version, we launched it a couple of weeks, maybe about a month after the open banking went live with the first version. And as I said, they got 2 data recipients, which is great. We've had in our program, in the first week after launch, so within 5 minutes of launching, someone had already tweeted that they built an integration with our API within 5 minutes, because we have a QR code to get the API OAuth token, or it's not an OAuth token at the moment, it's just a plain token at the moment. But they were able to get their QR code and access their data and then tweet about it within 5 minutes. Within 20 minutes, someone had built a dashboard and had tweeted about it. And so within the first week, like, this is no bullshit, right? Within the first week, Up had on our API nearly 1,000 customers who had already created a token for access. And then over 600 apps had been built on top of Up in the first 2 weeks. So for us, and I expect now that number's probably a lot more, right? So for us, open banking is amazing, and the CDR is very forward thinking, and it's a really great initiative from the Australian government, but actually just giving people access to their own data, easy, simple, with low barriers to entry, and letting them do what they like with that. We've seen amazing things being built already. So in the first few weeks of the API being released, people built, like, for example, we don't have a web platform. I said earlier that we're mobile only bank, right? And we have on the tree of Up, we have on our public roadmap, we're going to build a web platform one day, right? Well, somebody already built one. Like, someone already built an entire internet banking web interface for Up. Now, of course, that customer can only use it for their own data at the moment. Other people have built integrations with Google Sheets, with Xero, the accounting software. People have built, like, one guy is amazing. One person actually built it integrated into their home automation system. So every time you send them money, it turns on their sprinkler or it flashes their lights. And then another person built a Spotify interface where you can actually send your mate money and vote for a song, and it creates a playlist in Spotify, and the playlist is ordered based on how much money you've sent your mate, and then that money is, for example, donated to a charity. Like these crazy ideas that people are coming up with, they're not things that a bank would ever think of building, but they're really empowering consumers to not only access their data and protect their data, but also for them to use their imaginations and just create like banking of the future. It's amazing.
Amazing.
Exactly. And I think what I'm really like hearing, like, the community, usually banks, they don't have supporters or communities, we just, you have bank, but this is totally different. Like, people, like, how you communicate with them, how you are open to them, and you really build the community. That's really amazing.
It's pretty awesome. Like, I walk down the street at the moment. We're in lockdown, like serious, like we call it stage 4 lockdown in Melbourne, and so we're not able to actually leave our houses. And if we do leave our houses, we're not allowed to go more than 5 kilometres away from our house. So this was going back to January. But in January, I was walking down the main street of Melbourne called Collins Street, and I'm literally just walking there. There's, I don't know, tens of thousands of people, whatever. And someone walks towards me wearing an Up t-shirt. And as I walk past, I put my hand up and they give me a high five. I don't even know this person. And like, to be walking down the street and to see someone wearing an Up t-shirt, it's like, it's out of control. So, like, absolutely right. Like, the level of engagement and the passion that people have, it's like, I used to live in the UK, and a lot of my mates are still living in London. And when Monzo first launched there and they had their brightly coloured card, there was a vibe. There was like this amazing sort of movement. It really feels like that in Australia at the moment with Up, is that there's just like everyone's talking about it. Everybody wants to be an upsider. Everybody wants to tell their mates about it. It's just an amazing vibe. So to take that vibe and then convert it into a business and to keep innovating and keep staying ahead of the rest of the banks. And like I said, these are banks with billions of dollars to spend against us. And so, it's highly competitive. We have to sort of always be sort of ahead of the game. So our view is that, we don't want to launch a joint account. We want to reimagine and reinvent joint accounts. Like we call it 2Up because it's inspired from the computer games. And also we call it multiplayer banking. And multiplayer banking for us is something we'll release a little bit later this year. And the idea is that it completely reimagines and reinvents the way that a joint account works. If you've got single-digit percentage of the Australian population using joint accounts, that's because they're targeted at married couples. They're targeted at, people who want to have joint signatures or multi-level approvals or whatever. What about all the same-sex couples? What about all the roommates? What about all the shared houses? What about all the football teams? What about, all the people that want to have their money shared with each other but don't have an easy way to do it? There's no core banking system in the world that I know of that can actually support that. So we went right back to the drawing board and said, let's not do joint accounts. Let's build all the foundations for it. And then let's build multiplayer banking, where anybody can share it with anybody and everybody can set up joint accounts that they can contribute to. They can use them for shared resources, for charities. Like I said, same-sex couples, shared, because it's very difficult. How do you prove that your joint account? What happens if you break up? What happens when, people are sort of married, get divorced and then want to separate their accounts? You go to the bank and try and do that. It's really difficult. You've got to get all sorts of court orders and crazy shit. So for us, it was like, how do you reimagine and reinvent that thing from scratch? And then how do you leverage the enthusiasm and the love that people have for Up? So stay tuned for that one, because I reckon that is going to be amazing. But the API is actually another manifestation of that. It's like, how do you give back control? How do you reconnect people with their money? Who comes up with an idea to turn their lights on and off, or to create a Spotify playlist? Certainly a banker doesn't come up with that idea, right?
Yeah.
So if we can enable that kind of thinking, and we can let sort of the power of the people, let people actually say, this is what I want, this is what I want to build, well, then the API is just going to get better and better and better. And when we add OAuth tokens to it, when we add write access to it, so you can actually create transactions at the moment, we have write access for creating tags and classifying your transactions, but not for actually doing payments. But, we'll add that over time. And then I think people just, the world's their oyster. Their imagination is the only thing that's limiting them.
Yes. Okay. So banks right now, neobanks, are measuring it by the clicks. They're measuring by the user interface. Walk us through the design, even the decision to design the card, that I'm hearing that is also popular. Just share us the decision-making, the journey.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, there's a few things there. First of all, we are very contrary. Like we don't agree with or follow this idea about, we see all over the web at the moment, people comparing banks by how many clicks to do a payment or how many clicks to sign up or whatever. We probably have the most number of clicks, but it doesn't feel like it because we've created a user experience that is atomic. So when you sign up for a bank, I could easily reduce 20 clicks to 1 by making a big long form that asks you for all the details in sign up. And then I can say, cool, I'm Revolut, and I can sign up in a few seconds. That's bullshit, right? Like what we've done is we've taken people through an experience where what they do is they actually are asked one piece of information on each screen and they go through a completely redesigned sign-up flow. So the reason why we can sign someone up in just over 2 minutes and take them through all of the legislative requirements around KYC and literally have money in their account ready for them to spend with their digital wallet activated, the reason we can do all that is not based on the number of clicks, it's based on the unique user experience. And the user experience is not something that's easy to measure. I had a little Twitter rant about this with some of the reports that were being released over in Europe about, comparing all the different European neobanks. And I'm like, that's great because it's something that's tangible. And you can actually say a traditional bank takes 65 clicks and Monzo takes 26 and Revolut takes 29, whatever. Like that's really great, but that's only because it's tangible. It's something that's easy to sort of compare. But what does it feel like? Does it feel better to sign up for Nubank? Or does it feel better to sign up for N26? And does it feel like it takes 10 minutes or does it feel like it takes 30 seconds? Like that's the sort of psychological impact that a good customer experience, a good user experience can have that's very intangible and difficult to measure. So just that point first, right, is that we sort of went back and reinvented the entire sign-up process. And I'll tell you what the validation for us was, is that every big bank in Australia has an innovation department, has like a thought leadership group or whatever. And one of the guys that works with us and has worked with us for 10 years, his partner worked at one of the big banks and she was the head of their innovation team or whatever. And so he went into the big bank, with her on the weekend, whatever. And he said, what was absolutely blew his mind was that they had every single screen of our sign-up process mapped out across their innovation lab. And they were trying to analyze how it was that we could possibly create this amazing sign-up. Now that's fine. We're happy to be competitive, but for me that sent a very strong signal, and it was an affirmation that what we're doing is working and that people are taking notice. And it is actually the easiest way to sign up for a bank account in Australia is Up, bar none. So all the new neos, all the digital apps from the big banks and everything, they're all improving their sign-up processes, and some of them are really, really good, but absolutely Up is the best. And so I think that that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is that we wanted to use design as a language, and as it's part of who we are. It's how we think, it's how we want to interact. And we wanted our brand to represent good design. So one of the interaction points that we have as a digital bank with a customer, in fact, the only interaction point we have that's physical, is when they receive the physical card. So we actually eliminated that need by having instant issuance with Apple and Google and Samsung, and we have Garmin and Fitbit and all these other digital wallets. So why do we need to send people a card anymore? And maybe one day in the future we won't. But not only is it a tradition, but it's also kind of a requirement at the moment that you have to send someone this sort of piece of plastic. So we thought, well, let's sort of redesign the card itself. And then also let's redesign the way we send it to people. We set ourselves some design constraints. So one design constraint was we didn't want it to cost any more than a normal big bank would send out a trifold A4 letter in a normal envelope. We didn't want the cost of us doing that to be any greater than that. Of course, you can get these crazy welcome packs from these neobanks, and they spend $50, $80, $100 to create the pack. It's absolutely ludicrous. It's a waste of venture capital money. That's just stupid. So that was one constraint that we set. Another constraint that we set was that we wanted it to be a wow moment. It's the only moment that our customers get to interact with us physically, so we wanted it to be wow. So what we did, I'll keep it short, but there's a whole blog post about this. There's a couple of them. But what we did is that we used a centuries-old Heidelberg press, like literally a press, a manufacturing printing press, to create an embossed welcome pack. We actually carved out the welcome pack with a blade. We designed the whole thing in-house in our studio in the office, and then we made it so the card could slide in and out. Then we designed the card so the card was portrait, and it was the first popular portrait card in Australia. I'm not sure that it was definitely the first. There were some others that might have tried to do it, but it was the first portrait card in Australia. And globally, banks like Starling, for example, got a lot of press. Well, we launched ours a year before Starling launched theirs, right? But nobody knows in Australia. It's a big secret. But what we did is we made the card, we took all of the data, all of the personally identified data off the front of the card. And then we're the first bank in Australia to do that. So it looks like a plastic card in your wallet, but there's nothing on the front of it, just a logo. And now, like 3 years later, digital banks all over the world are doing that. And I'm certain that they were inspired by Up and what we were doing. But that experience when you open it up and you get this tangible thing that's made of card that's about, half a centimeter, or in the old sort of like inches, it's like, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe 4/16, a quarter of an inch thick. And then you can slide your card out of it, and it slides like when you receive something from Apple and you open it up and it sort of goes, it just opens beautifully. That's exactly what it's like. And so that experience was amazing. Then the other thing we did is that we printed on the back of the welcome pack a little savings chart, so that the actual card itself, which is made of recycled material and in itself is recyclable, and we wanted that not just to be like just thrown in the rubbish dump and end up as landfill, right? So there's sort of like an ethical or an environmental aspect to the design as well. And so as you can see, there's a lot of things that are going into it: cost, environment, ethics, tangible feel, design, all these sort of things. And so anyway, the other thing we wanted to do was we wanted to help our customers to save $1,000. So our customers are very skewed, very young. So we have around about 50% of our customers are aged between 16 and 25. And the largest age group of customers for us is 20. So that means that our customers are very young. And so for them to be able to say, save $1,000 in a year would be absolutely mind blowing. But if you think about it, it's like $3 a day. It's not a big ask, but for someone on a low income and someone that's just starting out their savings journey, it's a really big task and they don't really know where to start. So on the back of the welcome pack, we printed a savings plan for every upsider. And then you can actually, we put stickers in the pack, and you can use the stickers to stick your welcome pack up on the wall or on your fridge or whatever. And then every week you can cross off how much you've saved, and you can save it inside the Up app. And so now we're helping a whole new generation of Australians save money. And it's the first time they've ever gone on like a savings journey. And so I think if you think about like how design has impacted that thought process and how we sort of reinvented the welcome pack for a bank, it's quite extraordinary. When we did a blog post on it, we released the blog post, and it got picked up all over the world. It's our most popular piece of content that we've ever created, because like literally millions of people have interacted with that content all over the world simply because it was so crazy and so different. But by the way, the cost to deliver an envelope with a stamp and an A4 piece of paper in Australia was, call it around about the $7 mark. For us, we managed to beat that by about 20%. And so even though we created this amazing experience, to manufacture the card, to include a pack of stickers in the thing, to have a custom built recycled envelope, to have the card that's recyclable, to do all of that and the savings pack and deliver that, it cost about 20% less than it cost the big banks to deliver a plain A4 envelope. Yeah, so like it's amazing.
Wow.
Man,
Okay.
from now I'm jealous I cannot create the account and get the experience.
Yes.
I think it's really cool, like that nobody knows that we exist as well, right? Like, because Australia is so far away from the rest of the world that every now and then someone from London or someone from New York or whatever will ring up and say, "So what's up? Can you tell me about it?" And they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't even know," but it's just incredible.
Right.
And that's why we're doing the summit.
Although,
that's exactly why we're doing the summit, because there's so much knowledge out there and people don't know. I mean, in crazy markets, in Brazil, you have Nubank and other banks, and there's so many lessons, and we just gather all the, the policy makers, the thought leaders, the bankers, the traditional banks, the neobanks into one platform. And that's basically what we're doing today.
That's awesome. It's totally awesome. I mean, the other thing I'll say is that, it's easy to launch something and be excited about it. And everybody can go do their research. They might think maybe I'm just excited about it, but it's not just me. It's like there's a craze going on at the moment. But the other important thing is to build a viable business. It's no good, like we've never raised any money at all, no VC. It's fully self-funded, which in itself is a story. Like it's quite an unusual situation, because all the ones that we've mentioned, from Nubank to N26 to Monzo to Revolut to Starling, whoever, all of these banks are, VC funded or, been building different business models. Maybe they're credit funded in the case of Nubank, where they might have 10 or 20 million customers, but they're making a lot of money out of obviously credit. We don't have any credit products and we've not raised any capital. That's not to say that we won't. Like we'll do that maybe to grow, but at the moment, we've taken the first couple of years or the first 2 or 3 years of our journey, self-sufficient. But the thing that for us is not just about building a great business, it's about being able to compete with the incumbents. So for example, one of the things we're very proud of is that there's an organization in Australia that do an analysis of how trustworthy the banks are. So it's one thing to say, we're cool and we're different, it's a great user experience, but the number one thing when you're talking about banking is trust. Like, do people trust you? So anyway, in the neobanking, sorry, in the banking survey for trust in Australia, there was only one neobank that rated, and that was us. And we rated 7th in all banks in Australia. So we're in the top 10 banks in Australia, and we haven't even been public for 2 years yet. So I think to go from nothing, like to go from an idea to being into the top 10 trusted banks in Australia I'm more proud of that than I am of the welcome pack. Like the welcome pack is an amazing thing, but actually having people's trust and being able to be understood, and being able that customers have easy access to us, and know that there's something competitive, there's something better out there than what else they can get, I think is, is part of the story. It's no good just doing this stuff and having 1 or 2 customers. Like for us to sign up between sort of 500 and 1,000 new customers every single day says something about what we've been able to create.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are about to reach the end of the call, and I just want to maybe talk a little bit about the future. Maybe you want to share something about some new announcements that are coming, and the future of bank in general. Anything you want to share with us that will leave the participants here, and they're going to leave questions here. So if you can stay after, and of course communicate with global audiences. Yeah, sure. Take the stage.
Oh, right. That'd be great. Yeah, so look, I think a lot of the things that we've talked about have sort of touched on the future. So for example, in Australia, Up was the first cloud-hosted retail bank, right? So a lot of banks now are moving to the cloud, and therefore it reduces their costs, it improves their infrastructure, automation. Everything we do at Up is completely software driven, it's technology led, it's really automated. So I'd probably say the future of banking starts with our mission. I'll talk about some of the features as well, but the future starts with who we are and what we represent. And basically we believe that we can take people from a place where money is sort of a cause of stress and anxiety to a happier place where they can, people can feel empowered and they can feel more in control of their finances. And if we can achieve that, then it doesn't matter so much like how we do it, what the technology or what the features are. What matters is how people feel. And if people can learn how to spend and save, so we call it, spending wisely and saving effortlessly. If we can help 1 million Australians to save effortlessly, or if we can help 1 million Australians to spend more wisely, that would be incredible. So for example, we don't charge any markup on our foreign exchange transactions. And in Europe, that's a really big deal. And organizations like Revolut and Monzo and others have gone nuts because everyone's doing multi-currencies, everyone's traveling, all this sort of stuff. We don't have that problem in Australia. We're so far away from everywhere else in the world that we're in our own little corner. We don't have anywhere near the travel, and we only have one currency. So for us, what we wanted to do is we wanted to make it as easy as it is with Revolut or Monzo or N26 or anybody else in Europe. So we have a really awesome relationship with TransferWise for the international transfers, but we also have no fees and no markup on the international exchange rate, so that you can move your money around into different currencies and you can make payments and everything. But we made it so easy. There's no subscription, there's no fees, there's just nothing. And so not only are we the best in Australia, but we're on a global scale, we're significant. And we recently did some analysis to see that, we don't charge our customers any fees and we don't mark up the FX. We've actually saved our customers millions of dollars, just through that sort of single feature alone. And so for us, the future of banking is adopting these new technologies, delivering these great features, which I'll talk about, but also, positioning yourself for the betterment of the customer, so the customer is in control of their money. They do have meaningful insights. They do understand where their money's going and where it's coming from. So I think that's the first thing I say. And then secondly, I talk to features. We covered a lot of the stuff. The API will continue to grow. Open banking will continue to help with innovation and connectivity in the industry. And we'll see a bunch of new things coming out of that over the coming years. We're looking at expanding our product breadth. So not only is everything on the public roadmap, the Tree of Up, which I encourage people to have a look at it because it's awesome, but also what's not on the Tree of Up. I think we say in there that we're looking to do joint accounts and we're looking to do maybe exploring some credit products. But actually there's subscriptions, there's mortgages, there's superannuation, there's insurance, there's wealth management, there's share trading, there's term deposit. There's so many things, and none of those things are on the Tree of Up yet, because the Tree of Up kind of gives us like a 6 to 12 month sort of view of what we're working on. But I think one of our missions is to expand into all those other areas of sort of people's financial life, and to help people not just with spending and saving, but also help them with investment and wealth management and insurance and other things that we can help them with. So that's something to look out for. And then, as I said, the joint accounts is another really amazing one. And the other thing, we've been working very closely with MasterCard. MasterCard are our partners. We've been working really closely with them to launch what, hopefully be a world first in the way that we deliver digital and tokenized type of accounts. So again, that's just something to keep an eye out for, is that we, one day we won't have a welcome pack, and one day there won't be physical cards. People might be just represented by a virtual token, and we can do all sorts of cool things to eliminate fraud. And you've seen lots of companies sort of do this sort of stuff over the last few years in different industries, in payment services, in online e-commerce. And what we want to do is we want to bring that to the masses through banking, so that you basically, every merchant that bills you might be billing you with a different virtual authentication, which therefore if your data or your account is compromised, or if the merchant is compromised and your personal data is therefore compromised, well then it doesn't matter, right? Because no other merchant has that data. So they're the sort of things that I think are really awesome. And then the other one for us is recently we announced some really crazy features. Like we have an undo feature. So you can do your banking and then you can literally undo it and it just reverses the transaction. So that at the moment works for transfers. So if you transfer money, then you can just undo the transfer, and we'd like to expand that sort of way of thinking into other areas. So yeah, look, that's probably, a few little tips and tricks of things that will be coming out later this year. And if you want to know any more, then jump onto the Tree of Up and have a look, and then, shoot me some questions. I'm one of the co-founders of Up, and myself and our leadership team, we're all on Twitter, we're all on Instagram, we're all on TikTok, we're all on Facebook. So like you can reach out and ask questions. We're very accessible. We try to get back to our customers and our fans as quickly as we can. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Great.
Nice. Sounds
I'm
amazing.
excited for
TikTok.
Yeah, that's not unusual talk. That's for sure. I'm excited for the for next year. When we're gonna do the summit next year and interview you again. I mean, we're gonna look at the tree and see what was implemented. Other big tech fins, big players are coming. We have an interview today later with also with Facebook.
Awesome.
And other players, and let's try to use that opportunity to meet all of us during today and tomorrow, and thank you so much for giving us the time and to ask you all these questions. And I'm sure there are more questions over here that we can address later, but amazing. And Ivo, you want to say something to wrap up also before we end up?
I have full of paper of things. I need to search after the talk about Australian banking and about the app and the features you mentioned. Like for me, it's some ideas like totally new. So very interesting. Even I'm seeing new fintechs every day in Europe, and I thought almost in finance, almost everything were discovered. And what else? It's boring. You are the confirm. It's not true. There's always something you can bring, and just the connection, how we are connected with the customer. I really like it. It's sounds like for me, wow. It's really great.
Thanks
Thank
so
you
much, guys.
for the call.
Yeah, just to hear that from you guys is really amazing, because it gets pretty lonely down here in Australia. No one knows we exist. But, look, there's lots of exciting things happen here. We do have Google, we do have Amazon, we do have Stripe, we do have Square.
Sure.
There's a lot of and obviously the pandemic has meant there's a lot more isolation and people looking for something different and something new. And so, look, really pleased to be part of it. And thanks so much for having us on. Really appreciate it. It's been great.
Great.
Yeah,
so,
great.
Have a good rest of the day, and enjoy the summit.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.